Hey, our very first guest for this show is none other than the golden voice of reason, Seth Andrews. Welcome.
Just stop. Just stop. But thanks for having me. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Seth. This is our first time on screen together. Isn't that awesome?
Is it? Yeah. Well, I think I first met you when I spoke in Houston a year or
Oh,
three or whatever ago, and we've sort of crossed paths from time to time since, kept in touch, and so congrats on the new show. Thanks for having me.
thank you, thank you. I definitely much prefer the in-person hangouts. Like there's really nothing like that. Nothing compares to
Well,
that.
I think too in this often divided world, it's community is it comes in many forms, but there's nothing like being in the same physical space where you get a chance to really see people eye to eye. But I'll take this, otherwise we'd be separated by hundreds and hundreds of miles. So I've got no complaints. I've been around a while. It's funny. I'm doing this live show in my hometown of Tulsa with a couple of fellow activists, both of them in their 30s, and somebody said, "Oh, great, two cool kids and a fossil." And so I've come to the fossil stage of my activism. I figure I'll either be obsolete or the elder statesman, one of the two. I don't know which. But, I came out of hardcore fundamental evangelical Bible literalist Christianity. My parents were theologians, Christian school, Christian friends, Christian music, Christian education, Christian everything. And, uh, and I was that guy, I mean, I was a hardcore true believer. And I sort of grew into my 20s a Rush Limbaugh, Fox News Christian. And it took me a while. It took me a long time before I finally gave myself permission to start challenging. The doubts were piling up. And it's funny when you start asking questions and you give yourself permission not to just take it on faith, but to try to demand real answers. All of a sudden, the house of cards falls down, and you have to re-examine the world. And so that's what I did in my 30s, and then I wanted to help other people do the same. So I've been an activist for about 17 years, and I'm still kicking for what it's worth.
That's great. That's great. And so your channel, in case anyone wants to follow you on YouTube, is called The Thinking Atheist. But you are not the Thinking Atheist.
That's
It's a
right.
community, right?
Well, some people think, how arrogant is it? This man calls himself the thinking atheist. And, the TTA is an idea, it is a goal. It is not me. I mean, I'm the guy who took 30 years to figure out donkeys cannot speak Hebrew, right? I mean, I'm not that smart. I get around really smart people all the time, and I realize just how dumb I am. But for me, it was an encouragement. We come out of a faith culture, right? Trust not in your own understanding. Who hath known the mind of God? He uses the foolish things to shame the wise. So don't try to put the pieces together because it's beyond you anyway. And I thought, well, I want to create a culture or a community where we think faith is a terrible way to determine what's true. I mean, it's funny because even the believers that we know in our lives, they don't choose a college on faith. They tour the facility and interview the people and do the research and read the reviews and look at the costs and the grants and the benefits, and they do all this homework. And this is true in almost every aspect of their lives, where their kids go to
Mm.
school, what job they take, what products they buy. But when it comes to Christianity, somehow the most important question in the universe, they take it on faith. And so the thinking atheist is like, nah. Now it's a reminder that let's reject faith. Let's try to figure it out. And if we don't know, the honest answer is to say, I don't know. And the goal is to try to know. And I think that's a worthy pursuit. And it's stuck. I don't talk as much about atheism these days as I talk about humanism. We talk about politics and the culture and just brain psychology and technology and all these other things. And free thinking plays into all of that. So I guess it all ties together.
Yeah, I feel like I've done the same sort of journey, right? Like went through the angry atheist phase. Then hey, let's talk about atheism and all the Bible and stuff. And now it's more like, hey, humanism. That's what we need more of today,
You
especially
can
with
only
the
debunk
way. Yeah.
Noah's Ark so many times. You can only debunk the nativity story so many times. After a while, and it's not that it's not important, but atheism is what I don't believe in. I don't believe in gods, right? Humanism is proactive. What are my values? What do I think? Who do I care about and why? And what do we want to do about it? And so I'm not afraid of the word. I will say the word. I think it's important we normalize the word. But, I don't believe in God, but I do believe in good. And I think those two things can play well together.
That's true. That's true. You said you don't consider yourself very smart, but do smart people write books?
Oh, yeah.
I'll
Smart
shamelessly plug
and
them for
dumb
you.
people write books. Idiots write. Deepak Chopra writes books. Stephen Meyer writes books.
Okay, that's fair.
But
That's fair.
but I tend to, I have, diarrhea of the mouth. I'm always verbalizing, and if I'm not verbalizing, I'm writing. And so, it's funny when I wrote my autobiography, Deconverted, that was partially wanting to get it out and perhaps in the hopes maybe somebody else on a journey would either better understand the apostate, or maybe if they were doubting, they would say, "Oh my God, I'm not the only one who's had these thoughts," right? But it was also kind of like, I want to write this stuff down before I lose it, while it's still
Hmm.
clear, my own journey. I mean, I was familiar with my believing days, but all the other stuff that was going on, it was just such a churning soup at the time. I'm like, I want to hammer this out. It's almost like a diary. And when it all came together, it was so satisfying. And I thought, well, maybe I have something to offer in that way as well. It's not brilliant, but it's storytelling, and I think storytelling is an important thing in the arena of ideas. We can put data points, bullet points. We can have PhD types give us some really thick data, but I think it's going to be stories that help to really move hearts and minds and hopefully change the world. And that's my tiny contribution to the conversation.
But also, people want to feel like they identify with something or with somebody. So when you share your story, you're sharing something that perhaps somebody else is also going through or has gone through or will go
Yeah.
through, right? And it makes them
Yeah.
feel like, hey, it's not just me. I'm not alone out there. So I
I've had
think,
people, they're like, when you write about your Christian school experience, I went through the ACE or the Abeka program, or they put me in this cult where we were cordoned off, and our science books were essentially religious books. Or I was raised where we had to go to church every Sunday, or else, or I was raised this way, or I listened to Christian music. Wow, you mentioned Amy Grant, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Third Day, Michael W. Smith. We used to listen to those bands. Wow. And when people feel like, oh, someone else has walked in those steps, it is kind of validating. And I didn't expect that as much as it happened, but it really has happened. And it's kind of cool. And I've had people who knew me when I was a Christian radio host. I was on Christian radio in Tulsa for 10, 11 years. And I had people who listened to me when I was a Christian and when they were a Christian. And then I left, and we lived very separate lives. And all these years later, they found me again, kind of by accident. They're atheist, I'm atheist, and they'll reach out and say, "Oh, I cannot believe that this sort of serendipitous convergence has happened." It's kind of a cool story when it happens. So,
it is kind of. So, uh, all of this getting into people's heads through reading, hearing their stories reminded me of that time I called your show, and I think I almost broke you because I asked you a question and you didn't quite know how to answer it. And after I hung up, you were like, "Well, I'm gonna have to think about this some more."
I
Did
still don't
you?
know how to answer it. I still
You
don't. Go ahead.
don't.
Go ahead. Ask the question again. Go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of viewers know because I've asked it before on the show. Is how do you think, and not what do you think? Like what does it look like in your head? For example, for me, is I mostly hear a voice, but this wasn't always the case. Before, it was mostly visual, which was during the time that my hearing was really bad. And then when I got my cochlear implant, my thinking changed. I guess because of your senses are so different now that your mode of thinking shifts. So I don't know exact. I never. I can't think when did that happen. When did that change happen? I don't know. I do know that maybe like 2 years ago, somebody asked me that question, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like, wow, I'd never thought of that." And yeah, thinking back, I was like, "Well, but I used to think differently." So yeah.
I don't
Okay, somebody
know.
in the chat asked me not to break, so let's not
I
break
don't
you.
know. I mean, maybe I tend to see things. I probably, if I had to guess, it's more imagery in my brain than it is anything else. But I'm not really conscious of how the thoughts come. They just they're there. Oh, look, and then they spill out of my word hole. But how that happens, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure.
Which I'll never know, I guess. We'll give you another year to think about it.
Okay.
Because I
Yeah.
think this was like last year, maybe. I want to
Yeah.
say,
Ask
for
me
sure.
again.
Anyway, I will. Anyways, Egyptian god. What is that? What?
Well, I think there is an Egyptian god, Set, S-E-T. Someone brought to my attention that Seth or Set is
Okay.
a deity and that I share the name of a god. So
Ooh.
I'll take that, you know. And my namesake apparently is a figure, an entity of great power. So thank you so very much. And thanks, in all seriousness, thank you for allowing me to be a part of a wonderful charitable event. I think that anytime we use our
Yeah.
voices to better the world,
So
I think
let's get
that's
into that part then. All right. So I did a fundraiser very similar to this one, but for the same organization. It was like in 2013 when I shaved my head for them. But the reason I started doing it is because I have a friend who lost her daughter to childhood cancer. So I'm gonna tell a little bit of his story. This child that passed away, her name was Kim, and she was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 11 years old. She did treatment for 2 years, so she achieved remission when she was 13. Now, she went through high school, and then when she was in her senior year, she started doing a program to become an EMT. So she will go like on ambulance rides and, as part of a training and stuff like that. And one day she noticed that she was getting some pretty severe bruises after a long day. And she was kind of like, well, I didn't do anything that could cause it. And that is a symptom of leukemia, right? It's very easy bruising. So they went to have it checked. And unfortunately, her numbers were so bad that they immediately realized that she had relapsed and they admitted her right away. But this was right around the time that graduation was happening. So unfortunately, she quickly became really sick. She was septic. And because they knew that her time was limited, her mom and her high school principal brought her cap and gown and her diploma to her bedside. But by the time that they were able to do that, she had gone into a coma. So she was not conscious while they had like this small sort of graduation ceremony. And she sadly she never got to see that. She passed away just a few days after this graduation when she was 17 years old. And she will be turning 26 this year. So I would like people to donate, and the link is in the chat. People are posting it, like the moderators are posting it. It's also, I think, at the bottom of the screen. They're going to display it sometimes, and it's also pinned at the top of the chat. Now, don't send super chats because most of the money goes to YouTube. If you send through the link that is posted, it goes directly to the organization, which is called St. Patrick's. And so this on screen is you can scan the QR code and it will take you there. And on the left side of the screen, I guess it's my left side of the screen, that was Kim. They did a photo shoot right before she, went into the hospital. Well, it's heartbreaking to see stuff like this, and because she will be turning 26 this year. Her mom had an idea, and her idea was that people could donate any amount with the number 26 on it. You can donate $5.26, or $2.60, or $26 or $260, whatever you want, whatever you can give. You can give it. Okay, there's the link at the bottom. So that's what we can do. Now, St. Patrick's is a nonprofit that helps fund childhood cancer research. They started about 25 years ago, and up to date, they've been able to give $369 million in childhood cancer research grants. That is amazing. They're not associated with any type of government. Like they give most like private grants and to like more focused research that they've actually helped further some really good treatment. There is no cure for most childhood cancers, unfortunately, but there are treatments that make it to where the person can, live a pretty decent amount of time. So I'm seeing we do have some calls actually. Okay, we have a call already. I think it's from a previous caller. Did you have anything you wanted to add before we go on to the
No, no,
calls?
no, no. I just happened to see there's a bit of a discussion in the chat about my name
Is
and
there?
who
Okay.
Seth or Set was. I know that Seth is also in the book of Genesis, the third son of Adam and Eve. I always like to say that I'm the one son of Adam and Eve that was not involved in a homicide. So that's a nice way to say it. But the truth was, I was supposed to be named Ted or Theodore. But when mom and dad realized that they were having twins, they wanted rhyming names. So my twin sister is Beth, and I am Seth. And that's how I ended up with that name. So
I always forget that you have a twin.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. You did mention that to me before. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the reasons children get cancer according to Christianity, though. Right? I've heard several. Like I've heard of original sin, free will, born sinful. I think that's the funniest one I've heard. Okay. There was a call a couple of weeks ago. Erin Lewis, she's an author and fellow atheist. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I do. Oh, I know Aaron.
Okay, cool. So she was on the show, and we were talking to someone, and she had just shared that her nephew had unfortunately passed away from childhood cancer. And this caller says that babies are dying from whatever disease you want to talk about because they are born sinful. And the reason babies are born sinful is because when they're born blind and they're grabbed upside down by the feet and slapped on the butt. And so they start screaming and they get angry, and anger is a sin. You ever heard that one before?
I haven't heard that one. No. We were raised to believe in the age of accountability. So kids were off the hook until they were able to understand the salvation message 4, 5, 6 years old. And until then, if something happened to them, they were guaranteed heaven. But you are correct that the fallen world narrative, honestly, it often becomes victim blaming. I know somebody who's got multiple sclerosis, and I remember I shouldn't have approached it in this way. This is back in my angry atheist days, but I was like, why do you think God allowed you to have MS? And of course, put her back on her heels, and she was very upset, and I felt terrible about it afterwards. But her reply was, it's a fallen world, and there's sin, and sickness comes with sin, and all of this. And and essentially what she was saying was, because we are all so icky, and we are all so unworthy, right? The Bible says there is no one worthy, no, not one. That somehow God wasn't able to, according to his own rules, come in and either prevent MS or heal it outright, despite her prayers to be healed. And I thought, well, this is a very insidious shade to this. Children die of leukemia because it's a fallen world. People die up to 250,000 at a time in a tsunami because it's a fallen world. Hitler's Holocaust happened because it's a fallen world. And I just don't buy that, because it's a victim blaming mentality. If we weren't so sinful, God could intervene. That's a moral problem. it's a logical problem at the same end. And then we're talking about the same deity that's supposed to be all knowing, the omni God, who is smarter than any other creature in the universe, somehow didn't realize that essentially on day nine, his whole plan was going to go south. He didn't see it was going to, he didn't see the fall of an Adam and Eve. He didn't see the sin of humankind. Even after Lucifer was cast out of heaven, why would he create Lucifer if he knew that Lucifer would rebel and need to be cast out? I mean, the entire story at that first domino just falls apart. And if it was just fiction, that'd be one thing, but the victim blaming aspect of it is really harmful. And it's one of the reasons I speak out very strongly against it.
But it is a core part of Christianity. If you weren't a sinner, if you're not weak, if you're not less than, then you wouldn't need somebody above you, right? And you wouldn't need to meet those standards that God expects of you. And there will be no need for that. And therefore, there will be no need for the whole religion in the first place. So it's,
Well, we look at baptism. The symbolism is that you, when you are immersed, you die. You're actually dying to self, and then you are raised up again anew. You are a new creature in Jesus Christ. And I remember when I was baptized, it was a big thing, and everybody amened and praised the Lord and applauded. And I'm so glad you professed your faith. And I only later began to really understand that this is an attack on identity, right? I have to die and then become essentially someone else to be able to be redeemed from a condition that I had no choice in. Original sin really is an immoral idea, this inherited sin thing. And it was an amazingly liberating moment when I realized I don't need to die to me. I have value on its own terms, right? I don't need someone else to advocate for me. I don't believe that that I need a deity to have worth and value and agency. And even if I don't live forever, fine. My finite life is still precious. It's certainly precious to me, and no gods required. That was a pretty liberating moment in my journey for sure.
I think that promise of eternity is quite harmful as well, because people think of it as, okay, I have this life and there is suffering in it. So if there's suffering, that's okay, because that's going to end. And when it ends, then that means I'm going to go and live in this eternal life with all my loved ones and with Jesus that you're going to have to worship, day in and day out, which does not sound very fun. But that's the promise that you get, right? That this being that loves you and adores you so much, that puts you through all of this suffering just to test you, just to make sure you're worthy of that time in eternity. And I think it breeds a sort of mentality that since this world is so temporary, that you don't really need to try too hard. Yeah, sure, you can try the things that you think, that you interpret you need to do in order to get that eternal life, and fuck everything else, because nothing else really matters. Childhood cancer, well, it doesn't affect me, so like whatever. Don't, you know God will take care of it. He doesn't cure it because he can, but he won't, because free will and all of that stuff. So
Well, when I was growing up too, a lot of it was framed that this is like boot camp, right? He is strengthening the faith muscle. He is giving us trials and tribulations, or allowing them, because it really creates a greater sense of trust, right? In our weakness, he is strong. Somebody in the chat had mentioned the Mother Teresa argument, and I was going to bring up the same thing. Mother Teresa would talk about the suffering of the poor, and she believed that God took great pleasure in their suffering because it was in those low moments that they were most close to God. They had to lean on God because they couldn't lean on anything here. They were in great pain, they were destitute, they had no future. So God was the only potential hope they may have had. And again, that's pretty dark when you dissect it. I had somebody, and he is a smart guy, but he's a believer. I'm like, what's going on? Why in the world would God's plan involve so much suffering? John Loftus has a book called The God of Horrendous Suffering, which really dissects this thing. And he said, well, if you think of eternity, we can't even comprehend eternity as a time because it isn't time. It has no time. It's forever. And so if we live 80 years, it's nothing. And so the suffering that happens in this world proportionally, the ratio, it's not really anything. You just blink and it's over. And I thought to myself, this is a guy who is really stretching. I'm sorry that your baby was, killed in a car wreck. I'm sorry that you lost everything when your employer fired you and you ended up sleeping in the back of your car. I'm sorry that you were beaten by your spouse or you were sexually assaulted by someone. But in the grand scheme of things, it really is just the blink of an eye and doesn't really matter. And beyond all that, and I wish I'd said this at the time, but it hadn't occurred to me, if you're really all that smart and you're God, you can develop a version of that plan that doesn't include all of the suffering. You can just do kind of the same stuff and let's just remove the assaults and the car wrecks and the cancer and the assaults and everything else. So I don't know. It's the whole thing really is problematic in that way. And again, it comes back to victim blaming. Your suffering is because you're a sinner. And if we hadn't been so icky, maybe the path would have been easier. And I just think that's wrong.
Talking about like, why couldn't God create this sort of system or creation um, that doesn't include all this suffering? And one of the reasons you hear is, well, he can't violate your free will. But if my child is, let's say, 3 years old, right? Mine's 14 now, but when they were 3 years old and they were crossing a busy street, you bet your ass I'm gonna go and violate their free will for their safety, knowing that if I don't, then they're either gonna suffer through, surgeries and pain, or worse, they're gonna die. So why should I allow that free will to happen? If God is a good father, why doesn't he use that loophole of, hey, well, yeah, sure, you smoked packs of cigarette every day for 30 years and now you have cancer. So like, but you want it gone now because you're praying to me to go away. But I don't want to violate your free will of having smoked all those cigarettes. Like, I don't know.
Well, and the free will argument falls apart when it comes to why isn't God more clear, right? The divine hiddenness arguments. Why doesn't he just come down and solve the mystery for the generations in a way that's undeniable? Why are we looking at a 2,000-year-old book anonymously written that's been hyper translated in contradictory ways and says all kind of crazy batshit stuff, blah, blah, blah? Well, free will, free will. And I'm like, our will is best engaged freely and we make the best decisions when we have the best information. So if Jesus shows up in my studio in 10 seconds and he says, I exist, and he is able to demonstrate himself in a way that I simply cannot deny, I still have a choice. I still have free will to choose that God or to not. So having the best information, having God proven undeniably and indisputably has nothing to do with my will because I still decide whether or not I'm going to follow that. So the argument is pretty awful. Coming back to God's design, I did a whole speech called Seth Andrews versus God, who is the better intelligent designer. A lot of people who were like, look at the trees, look at the birth of a beautiful baby, look at these things. It's obviously the fact that if the earth was just a few feet closer to the sun or further away, we'd all be dead. It must all be made with us in mind, kind of stuff. And so I'm like, fine. And I just went through example after example of poor design. I talked about so many of the apologists, like the Discovery Institute guys that wear freaking glasses, scientifically developed vision correction because their eyes are out of focus. We talk about the esophagus and the windpipe right next to each other. And so thousands of people choked to death. We talk about arthritis, joints that wear out. We talk about the inefficient and horrifyingly painful way that people are born, often harming the mother and the baby. We talk about so many other examples. The appendix. Why would God give us a tiny little bacteria filled hand grenade of doom that will explode inside of us at random? And if we don't go and get it taken out and get the infection dealt with, we die in great pain. Just time after time, example after example, we can think of ways that we could have done a little bit better. So,
Or
if
a
someone
lot.
ever says, wow, intelligent design is everywhere and it's undeniable, well, I mean, just point to the nipples on men or, uh,
Other parts.
junk
Sensitive part.
DNA. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just go through a laundry list of things that are pretty horrifying and say, well, tell me what the purpose is for that because it makes no sense.
It's true, it's true. That was actually the speech that you were given when you came to Houston and I met you. And I remember that because there was a part. I was listening to the whole thing, and it was like really, really good. And then all of a sudden, you start talking about cochlear implants, and I'm like, wait, what's happening? I have a cochlear implant, and so through that, I found out that your father was deaf.
Mhm.
How cool is that? Well,
Well,
yeah,
no, no, no. I
kind of
get the
happy,
spirit of what
but
you're saying. What a coincidence that we have something that we can relate to each other. And Dad had
yeah,
some illness when he was very young, and it somehow damaged his ears so that his hearing almost immediately disappeared. And he was very stigmatized to be a non-hearing person. Deafness at that time. I mean, he was a product of the 50s and 60s, and so he refused to sign. He didn't learn sign language because he was going to be a lip reader. He was going to do his best to function in the real world without looking like a deaf person. And that's kind of tragic. He ended up with hearing aids, but and it may be one of the reasons that I found myself being able to use economy with my words, open my mouth and articulate is because we had to be clear verbally. He had to be able to read our lips. And finally, they would bring him into church services. Oh, Lord, we call down your healing power. Please restore his hearing. Time after time after time, they'd put him in the prayer circle, and time after time after time, he would leave disappointed until finally he just stopped going to church because he was terrified somebody was going to see his hearing aids and make an object out of it. And he'd had enough. And it was science that provided the solution. The cochlear implant, one of these remarkable inventions that opened up his world, and he was able to hear my voice, and he was able to hear his grandkids, and he was able to hear the sound of the phone ringing and the TV and traffic and everything else, and it opened up his world. But for all the praying that was done, whatever you ask in my name, I will do it, that the Father might be glorified in the Son. Believers talk all the time about the power of prayer, call down prayer, which makes no sense anyway, because what you're doing is that if God wanted it done, his will was done. And if his will is done and you're praying something else, you're asking him to change his will. And if his will was for him to hang on to the solution until you begged for the answer, then that's extortion. The whole prayer thing falls apart. But, Dad didn't see it that way. And he didn't see any irony when he relied on scientists to solve the problem that prayer did not. Now, I'm thankful that he was able to hear his world in that way in the final decade of his life. But the irony was not lost on me, even if it was lost on him.
that's true, and that's the problem with prayer. As we talked earlier, right? When you think you're gonna have this forever life, then you don't care about stuff like this. And when you think that you have someone above you that is going to take care of all your problems or all of your earthly problems, then there is no incentive to seek solutions that are of this world, right? So you just pray and you just hope and you just wait for a miracle. When on the other side, the majority of scientists are not religious, and those are the people that are doing the things that benefit people like your father, unlike myself, with cochlear implants, or also have a double cornea transplant. I was legally blind for several years. I wasn't even able to do stuff like this on the computer. It was like completely impossible for me to be on the computer. And now, thanks to those scientific advances, I can see pretty well. Now, there's some religions that don't even allow a blood transfusion because, it's like disrespect on the body or whatever the rules might be for different ones. So having the corneas of two different donors will probably be a pretty big sin, probably a pretty bad thing. So on this topic, I want to know, like, becoming an atheist is not easy. It's like it's not an active choice that you like wake up one day and like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna be an atheist today. It's kind of like a process or a transformation that you go through, but it does come at a cost. It can cost you your identity. Perhaps in your case, when having been a Christian radio host, or you lose the community, that place where you will, see your friends and like did things with groups that were more like tailored to your interests. You lose that comfort that we talk about, of the afterlife, seeing your loved ones after you pass. And for me, one of those major losses was the hope for healing. And I was always big on science, so it's really weird to me how my brain sort of separated the two. I guess I can understand why people still do that, because I did at one point. But now, you know, woke up. I'm woke now. We're woke anyway. But when you struggle with like such severe health issues as myself, and hoping and praying can feel like you're actually doing something or you're taking some sort of action. It can ease your anxiety. And when I became an atheist, somebody was just asking about Dave Warnock, and that's why this reminded me of that, because Dave Warnock was someone that helped me come to terms with the fact that because of my many health conditions, such as like type 1 diabetes or adrenal insufficiency, if I don't take my medications for a day or two, it's fatal. And if there's any small change in my dosage or any issues with my pump, with my insulin pump, I could end up dead literally any day. I am shocked that I've made it to 40. I'm not 40. You didn't hear that. But his Dave Warnock's ability to, as he will say, carpe the fucking diem, right? To quote him, it gave me this opportunity to be able to relax and like enjoy the ride. So I want to know who has been your sort of inspiration, or someone that has taught you something or given you a positive outlook since, well, I guess throughout your journey to becoming today's heathen.
Well, it's probably a two-part answer. I think the figure that was the most seismic for me when I was doubting was Christopher Hitchens. It's funny, I had doubts and I was skeptical. I was, increasingly dissatisfied, maybe the better way to say it. And I came across a debate video with Christopher Hitchens and a rabbi named Shmuley Bochiek at the 92nd Street Y in New York. And I didn't really follow Hitch. I don't know how I happened upon the debate on YouTube. I don't know what it was, but it popped up and it's like 90 minutes. And I'm like, well, I'm not Jewish, but the good rabbi should be able to handle the Bible. So let's just see what happens. Click. And I was working on some graphic stuff. I was a video producer, so I was kind of brainless, time consuming point and click keyframe stuff. So I let the debate play on the other monitor. And I remember at the end of that 90 minutes, I felt like something had exploded in my life, or I like the guy I'm supposed to disagree with made the most sense. And it ignited a fire. And I began to click around for other Hitch videos. And then I heard other names of other activists. And then I started watching their lectures. And then they have books. I started to buy their books. People said I was obsessed. And I really was. I felt like I was making up for lost time. I was seeing the world, after all that time. And I never got the chance to shake Hitch's hand to thank him. I never got the chance to meet him.
Uh,
I had this dream. This is a few months ago. I had this vivid dream that he was still alive and I was at a convention. And afterwards, I got access backstage, and there he was speaking in his perfect voice, and doing his thing. And I remember in my dream, I got the chance to go up and I was like, "You have no idea how instrumental you've been. I know you hear it 1,000 times, but it completes me to be able to tell you what you mean to me." And he said, "Well, tell me your story. Let's go have a drink." And so we went and found a little spot. We sat at a table and went, it was a long ass dream. And I was able just to say the stuff. And then I woke up and I was like, no, I was just so heartbroken. But it was kind of
uh,
therapeutic in a way because in some way I got to actually say the word that, it's funny. You were just there and it just altered the trajectory of my life, just altered it. And beyond that, the people that inspire me, I mean, I can get starstruck as much as anybody. But the stories that really, really inspire me, and this sounds like a Hallmark movie, it sounds like I'm lying, but it's absolutely true, are people, just everyday people in the community who talk about the day that they first said out loud that they don't believe, even when there were consequences. When they decided, I do have value and I'm going to speak in my voice and I'm going to carve my own path. And then they wanted to maybe tell me, well, there was a show that I heard that you did and a guest that you had on inspired me, or there was a specific episode that caught me at a critical time in my life, or maybe they existed far beyond my circle and their journey happened and they just wanted to come and relate it to me. The people who have that type of courage, even if they don't say it out loud, because I know we're playing chess, not checkers, and there are consequences, whether it's losing custody of the kids or losing a job or whatever. I mean, I don't begrudge anybody for playing a longer game. But if they're honest with themselves and they say, no, I'm not going to take somebody else's word for it. I'm not going to take it on faith. I'm going to be true to myself. My journey is about me. I don't know anybody else anything. The people that get there, those people really inspire me. And I try to remind them how much courage that takes. It just takes so much courage. And I'm like, people like to say nice things about me because I've got a big platform and I've been doing this a long time. But it's the less glamorous stories that are equally or more important of people who realized I have a voice and I'm going to speak in it. That really does inspire me.
I love that. Okay, Neil is paying you a compliment. You know who Neil is, of course.
I
I
know,
don't even
Neil.
have to talk.
What was the compliment? I don't,
Good, good, good.
I'm scanning. So
Anyway,
let me ask you a
um,
question. So,
yeah,
right
go ahead.
before you shaved your head for the first time, were you just
Mhm.
insanely curious as to how your head is shaped? Like, I've got a very tall forehead, and I
Yes.
think if I was to shave my head, I would probably look a bit like Lurch from the Addams Family. But I'm curious, like, is it contoured? Is it smooth? Yeah,
It's
I'm
pretty smooth, but keep in mind, it was before I had my cochlear implant. So now it might be a little bit weird because there are components inside my head, right? To where the what is called the processor, which is the outer part of the implant, attaches to my head. So okay,
yeah.
let me
Isn't
show
there a magnet under the skin and
you.
it just
Yeah,
locks
so
into place? Yeah,
hmm,
yeah.
so it sticks to my head. The magnet is on the outside. The magnet
Okay,
is part of the little wire thing, and the wire is what connects, what sort of sends the information from the microphone to the brain. Because I hear with my brain, I don't hear with my ears. It's like surround sound for my head.
cool.
Um, but there is a metal part inside, and where they did the incision and everything. So it is oddly shaped in that specific spot. But I'm not worried about it because I always have the implant on whenever I'm in public. So it's like, okay, that covers that part. So I'm
All
not
right.
really too concerned about how that looks. But I'll say the shaved head felt pretty good. It feels pretty good. I don't know, liberating, or like the feeling of no hair. I don't like hair very much.
All right.
And I guess
Uh,
Oh, hey, there you are. I think we hear something now. Maybe.
Can, can y'all hear me?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you now.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, this
How's
is
it
my
going?
first time on the talk show
Oh, cool.
on the show.
I mean, you've been on my show before, to be fair, so don't be scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So can what's your friend's name on the call? Andrews. I don't want to get his name wrong.
Oh, Seth. This is Seth Andrews. Well, not
Seth.
me.
Okay.
He's Seth.
So so recently I kind of I stopped considering myself religious, and I just become more observant, and I'm more, I would say I consider myself more spiritual, one with the universe, and I strongly believe in energies, and energies from people, energies from nature and stuff. And I know there's an argument that y'all keep on making, about like religion, and there's, I don't disagree whatsoever. But what I'm trying to like argue, and what I have observed through my life, because I was a Jehovah Witness, and there was issues there. I was a Christian, and there was issues there. There was issues whenever I studied in college. I had a bunch of friends that were very diverse, and there was always issues. There seems to be issues everywhere I go, not necessarily because of me, but just because of that's human nature. And I have come to realize that humans are just horrible creatures, and that's why we hear all these stories with little kids being involved in violent crimes and horrible stuff that no humans should do. And I just believe that humans are, I guess, like, the purpose of life is to just keep your circle small, I would say, and just to do what you can do. But I don't think it's necessarily like religion or certain beliefs, because like I said, in Christianity, I knew people that were great. And then in Jehovah Witness, I knew people were great too. And then people in college, and I have Muslim friends that, they were good people. So I feel like humans, it's natural for humans to excuse bad behaviors, but yet be good people, if that makes sense.
Well, throughout the human condition, we will find examples of antisocial and destructive behaviors and pro social productive behaviors. We find awful people, we find good people. I mean, we'll see action reaction everywhere. I don't make the blanket statement that people suck, although I understand why that sometimes feels good to say. We wake up and see awful people doing horrible things. But then, I see the counter. I see so many people standing up. It's like watching the rise of fascism in the United States and the cruelty of ICE and all of these horrible things that are taking place. But we're also seeing millions upon millions of people literally taking to the streets and calling their Congress people and having hard conversations in their circle and wearing the shirts and waving the banners and trying to say, no, we want love to win the day. And they do so because they are good. I think good and bad comes down to values. And I think this is something that has to be assessed individually, person by person. There's a lot of tremendously awful people in the world, but I also know there are a tremendously high number of good people in the world. I think you just meet people and take it case by case. Don't give up on everybody.
I completely
Yeah.
agree with that, and I think that the circles and the people that you associate with, that you keep in your life, really gives you hope for humanity. Like, yeah, we see all the terrible people that are involved, that are listed in the Epstein files, and the people in charge of the government right now, and the ones that are not doing anything about it, and about the suffering that they're literally seeing, and that they know happened, right? But then we see the people on the other side, the ones that have eyes, that are using their eyes, that it is our fault for having eyes, and it shows you and it tells you that no, we're not everybody is a terrible person. I'm a big believer that childhood shapes adults. And having learned about childhood trauma, the way that our brains get rewired based on, especially before we even begin to set memories, before the age of 5, the brain is majorly connected. And so if you have people who have a traumatic upbringing, who don't have that nurture from their parents, who are left to their own devices and barely taken care of, like their basic needs are barely met, and they don't have that connection with somebody that is caring. Those are the people that more often than not grow up to be completely um, desensitized, I guess, to the horribleness of certain actions. And so these actions become normalized to them. These behaviors become normalized to them. And I think that there's a quote that I always like to say: hurt people hurt people. So these were people that were hurt during their key developmental time of their lives. They are going to grow up into people that hurt others. That's why everybody needs therapy. I think it doesn't matter whether you think you are fine. Everybody could use therapy. They could use tools to develop, to sort of know how to handle their emotions, to know how to handle any type of trauma that they may have been through that maybe they don't even realize was trauma. So I do agree that we're seeing such horrible things in the world, but keep the hope that there are people out there that care, that are doing things, that are good people.
Yeah, I have a follow up question for y'all.
Huh.
So I agree with y'all too. I don't think everybody's bad, but I think for the most part, you know, it's in human nature. People are selfish and they look out for their own. You see it in the animal kingdom. Grizzlies, they kill the kid. I don't know what's the proper word for it, but the kid bears, the male bears, they kill them because in fear of like they'll grow up and they'll get you know. So
But we also see throughout the
I
animal kingdom the protection of kin, even at the cost of their own lives. Eric has talked a lot about how primates in the wild might see another primate struggling in water, potentially drowning, and they will go out to save it and drown themselves. So, I mean, again, we're talking case by case. For every person who abuses the
yeah,
child, you're going to find people who advocate. For every person that says gay people shouldn't be able to get married, you'll find people marching in the streets with pride saying, yes, they do. For every person that says that, the Epstein files are all a big hoax, there are other people demanding that the victims get justice. And that's a massive amount of good people. So I just reject or resist the idea. I mean, what you're saying is accurate. There's cruelty and antisocial behavior all around us. But I'm telling you, good people are there. You're one of them. I'm one of them. AJ's one of them. The people watching are good. And that should give you a little bit of hope. Okay.
yeah, I completely I respect that. I agree with that. But like I said, as I've become more observant, as I see more stuff, sadly, like I won't ever give up on fighting the good fight. I mean, I've fought along with AJ and her husband in protest, but I genuinely think that there's there's a better chance of us getting into war than world peace being achieved.
Well, that's actually a question about behavior, which brings certain personality types into power. And then those power players become tribal. They are often acting in extreme self interest against the will of the rest of the tribe. That is a conversation that's much too deep to have in the next 30 seconds because we got to draw to a close. But I do appreciate your opinion very much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call,
Thank you.
Samuel. I'll chat with you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you
See
for
you.
having me. I enjoyed the whole show. That did great.
Awesome, thank you. So he used to call himself a Christian, so you know. But
Oh,
now no longer does. So he came to NanoCon with us, and we have lots of really good and deep conversations about morality and gods and faith and all that good stuff. And we've gone to the No Kings protest together. So we're kind of all on the same side of the good side,